Now, the Trump administration's efforts to deport millions of illegal immigrants continues to be obstructed by blue cities, Democrat strongholds such as Chicago, LA and Boston. Let's hear now from the Boston Mayor, Michelle Wu.
Boston received a letter from the Attorney General of the United States on official letterhead from the federal government threatening to prosecute city officials and withhold federal funds unless we cooperate with carrying out mass deportations. These threats are serious and consequential. But our same communities have told me loud and clear that silence in the face of oppression is not an option.
Joining me now is political advisor and commentator CJ Pearson. CJ, there you have it. According to the Boston mayor, deporting illegal immigrants is oppression. When are these democracy deniers going to understand that Donald Trump has a mandate from the American people to implement these policies? This is what he campaigned on.
You know, it's as if they've been living under a rock, Rita, right? You know, the American people, as you just said, did give President Trump a mandate to secure our southern border and to make America safe again. This is exactly what he is doing. When the American people voted resoundingly for President Trump, they voted against open borders. They voted against allowing illegal aliens to be given a type of preferential treatment that even American citizens aren't given when breaking the law. And if the mayor of Boston has a problem with that, well, she should take it up with the 80+ million Americans who voted for President Trump.
Now to an Australian columnist who has written a piece for the Courier Mail, a newspaper here in Queensland, calling for Donald Trump to be banned from entering Australia. Madonna King has written, should a convicted felon guilty on dozens of accounts of falsifying business records be welcomed into Australia with open arms? What about an overseas criminal with a history of bragging about groping women? Would you allow him to bed down in your spare room? What about if this same man, an unrepentant offender and misogynist, used his office to hurt what you were fighting for in terms of climate, trade and security? Oh, CJ, there's plenty I'd like to say, but please do the honours.
You know, it's interesting that all of a sudden those on the left, even in Australia, all of a sudden care about who comes across their border, right? You know, if only liberals here in this country cared just as much about who actually slipped across our border, we would probably be a safer nation. You know, so it's interesting to see that, you know, from our friends, you know, across the world. But I guarantee you, I'm sure the prime minister over there will welcome President Trump anytime he wishes to make a trip over.
Oh, I think he would be absolutely begging the president to make a trip. He's been trying to get a one-on-one meeting to do some trade negotiations and has not been successful thus far. But that is the level of coverage on US politics that you get in Australia, you get throughout much of the Western world. Does that trouble Americans at all? Because it's pathetic, it is pathetic, but do Americans care that their president is so misunderstood and misrepresented by the mainstream media?
No, because we understand him. We understand this is a leader who leads from the front and not from behind. This is someone who does as he says and means what he says when he says it. And this is a man who actually intends to deliver on the promises that he made to the American people. He's not some career politician who runs on one thing and does another. And so while the cosmopolitan liberals in New York City and LA and DC pretend to not understand what he's doing, the American people fundamentally and emphatically understand what he's doing. And they know that all that he is doing will make America great again, and we are 10 toes behind him in doing that.
Now, CJ, you posted an image of Monday's meeting of world leaders gathered at the Oval Office to discuss an end to the Russian-Ukrainian war. Tell me what you see in this image, why you see it as so significant.
I see an America that's finally leading from the front again. Under Joe Biden, we had a man in the Oval Office who didn't even know that he was president of the United States. And looking at that picture, frankly, it's a breath of fresh air. The world respects us again. The world fears us again. And that's exactly what we need to do if we're going to bring peace to the world again. As Vladimir Putin even acknowledged in his press conference just a few days ago, this war in Ukraine would have never happened if Donald Trump had been in the White House. And now we are inching closer and closer to peace every single day because of his bold and decisive leadership.
And we had the Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni saying something has changed after now more than 2 years of this devastating war. There is finally a shift and peace seems possible. How hopeful are you that there is going to be a peace deal with Russia and Ukraine? It's the one big conflict, other than what's happening in the Middle East, that Trump hasn't been able to do much about until this point.
I'm immensely hopeful because I know the American people didn't just elect a commander-in-chief in Donald Trump, but they elected a deal-maker-in-chief. This is a man who literally wrote the book, The Art of the Deal, and he is showing us in real time what that actually looks like. If anyone can bring peace to this conflict, it's going to be President Trump. And you ask me, do I feel hopeful? I feel a lot more hopeful today than I ever did under Joe Biden when he was in the White House.
Now, I want to ask you about a saga that's involving the New Yorker, a magazine you're very well aware of, after they really did a hit piece on you, suggesting you were having some white supremacist MAGA party when they cropped out all the people of colour from the picture. But they've got another saga at the moment with a writer called Doreen St. Felix who called Sydney Sweeney an Aryan princess. Well, this supposedly anti-racist writer has in fact posted some virulently racist statements. She has said things like, whiteness fills me with a lot of hate and the Holocaust is the worst thing to happen to black people. How is the New Yorker handling this controversy?
It's absolutely disgusting, but oftentimes, it's actually part of the course. We see that a lot of these people who are quick to point out that you're racist and they're racist are often the true racists themselves, as is shown by this entire saga. Will the New Yorker actually punish her in any real way? Remains to be seen. They didn't actually punish the writer who wrote the defamatory piece about me, so I actually don't hold out much hope for that. But what I will say is that stories like this are exactly why so many people, not only here in America, but across the world, are losing faith rapidly in the corporate media, and there doesn't seem to be any chance that they'll be regaining it anytime soon.
Well, it's just so blatantly hypocritical, isn't it, to hold yourself up as some sort of anti-racist warrior when you are spewing this racist diatribe on a fairly consistent fashion. There were plenty of other statements I could have quoted there. And with the New Yorker, I know you've got a legal action proceeding against them. Any update on that?
We're fully, completely charging ahead on this. And as we see, it's needed. It continues to be needed because Brock Collier, the reporter who wrote the piece about me, is not alone. We also see that his colleagues share a lot of the sentiments. And, what's interesting to me is that people wonder, why do these people continue to misunderstand Trump's America? Why do they continue to misunderstand, the other half of this country? They don't misunderstand half of this country. They hate half of this country. And the sooner you actually realize that, it actually all makes sense about why they speak the way that they do about all of us.
Now to a story in today's New York Post. They report Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard has pulled the security clearance of 37 current and former officials for the part they played in the Russian collusion hoax. CJ, this is just another step, another development in holding those who abuse public trust and deliberately push misinformation accountable.
Exactly is that. And, God bless Tulsi Gabbard for being the position that she is and bringing accountability to a place that is desperately needed. I think a lot of people have lost faith in our intelligence community, which is actually very counterintuitive. If there's anyone we should be able to trust, it should be our intelligence community. And so these people who abuse their positions, abuse their powers, and actively subvert it, the rule of law and weaponize government against, again, half of America should be held to account. And Tulsi Gabbard is doing just that with this latest move.
Before you go, do you expect to see the likes of the former CIA director, John Brennan, or FBI director, James Comey, actually face criminal charges? There's reports they're under investigation. We've got James Comey unravelling. He's posting these bizarre videos about Taylor Swift that are rather creepy. Do you see some real accountability happening at some point?
God willing. And, I'll tell you this, if Pam Bondi is able to secure that, JD Vance might have some competition in 2028.
Well, could be a good ticket, JD Vance and Pam Bondi. That would be a formidable ticket right there. CJ Pearson, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Definitely. Thank you so much.